Greetings students, welcome to today's lesson. As a recap of what we did the last time, we talked about participle phrases. And in particular, we introduced that a participle phrase is a group, which is a group of words that functions as a participle. We went ahead to describe what a participle is, and we say that a participle is a verbal word that describes a noun. Okay, or maybe just say a verbal word that gives us more information about a noun, probably what the adjective does, but here it's a verbal word. For example, we say that expected gives us more information about visitors. Okay, so that in a sentence you can have the expected visitors have arrived. So expected there is not used as a verb, rather it is used as a participle where it gives us more information about the noun visitors. So we went ahead to say that now, having said that participle phrases are a group of words that function as a participle, we say that they are also they are introduced by present participles or past participles. The phrase that is, so that we say that this participle phrase is normally introduced by a present participle or a past participle. For example, leaving the baby on the bed, Juma removed the pan from the fire. So this is an example of a present participle phrase. So that we have leaving the baby on the bed as a present participle phrase. We also went ahead to say that the action, that the present participle phrase is used to emphasize that the action in the participle phrase happens immediately before the action in the main phrase, so that both happen almost simultaneously. This action comes immediately after this other action. This action in the main sentence comes immediately before the action in the participle phrase. So the participle phrase is separated from the rest of the sentence by a comma. For example, leaving the baby on the bed, comma, Juma removed the pan from the fire. For grammatical purposes, it is important that you separate it from the rest of the sentence using a comma. Now, this time we're going to look at past participle phrases. So remember we said that the participle phrase is normally introduced by either a present participle or a past participle. So when you look at the past participle phrase, so in such a case we will have the phrase will start with a past participle. For example, left on the bed, comma, the baby began crying. Or having finished dinner, comma, we all went to sleep. So in both cases, they all begin with a what? a past participle phrase. And the second sentence again, it begins with a past participle phrase. Okay? So in this sense, the past participle is used to emphasize that the action in the participle phrase comes before the action in the main phrase. So the participle phrase, let me just say the function per se. The past participle phrase is used to indicate that the action in the participle phrase happens before the action in the main phrase. So the past participle phrase is used to indicate that the action in the participle phrase happens before the action in the main phrase. Let's come back to our examples. Left on the bed, comma, the baby began crying. So this action happens before this other action begins. It takes place before the other action in the main sentence. And this other sentence, having finished dinner, comma, we all went to sleep. Again, finishing dinner happens before going to sleep. Leaving the baby on the bed happens, the baby being left on the bed happens before the baby begins what? Crying. So I'm going to back to the second sentence, having finished dinner. I'm going to explain something about that. We can use having in front of a participle to indicate that one action finished before the other begins. So I'll just note that down. So having is also used with a past participle to indicate that one action is finished before the other begins. Okay, so having finished dinner happens before the going to sleep. Okay, let me add you one more example. Having left the baby on the bed, comma, Mary went outside. So let me read the sentence. Having left the baby on the bed, comma, Mary went outside. So the leaving the baby on the bed happens before this action happens before Mary going outside. So we can use having, or we can just use it on its own to indicate that that action happens before the other begins. Remember, the past participle is used to indicate that one action happens before the other begins. The action in the participle phrase takes place before the action in the that is expressed in the main sentence. Okay. One thing we also need to know that when with the participle phrase, both actions need to refer to the same person. Both actions need to refer to the same person. The action of leaving the baby on the bed and going outside need to be performed by the same action, so that you can say that the two actions must refer to the same person. Okay? For example, it's Mary who leaves the baby on the bed, and it is Mary who goes outside. So why this? Why say that the two actions must refer to the same person? This is to help us avoid the idea of dangling participle phrases. This, when you ensure that the two actions refer to the same person, it also helps us to avoid ambiguity. It helps us to avoid the idea of dangling participle phrases. What are dangling participle phrases? These are just participle phrases that refer to different things. The action in the participle phrase is different from it's performed by a different person. Okay, so the two actions do not correlate. The two actions, in the sense that the action in the participle phrase is not performed by the action in the main phrase. For example, I have said the dangling participle phrase. Here, the action in the participle phrase is performed by a different person and not the same as the one in the main phrase or sentence. So the dangling participle phrase, here the action in the participle phrase is performed by a different person and not the same as the one in the main phrase. Let me give you an example. Getting poor results. My parents were really upset. Okay, getting poor results. Sorry. Getting poor results, comma, my parents were really upset. Getting poor results, comma, my parents were really upset. We've said that the two actions must refer to the same person. So this one is a dangling participle phrase. Why? Because the getting poor results is not the same person as the one who was. My parents are not the ones who got the poor results. So the getting poor results is not performed by the parents. Let me write this clearly. Is not performed. This action of getting poor results is not performed by the parents. Okay? The parents are upset, but the idea here is now the student is the one who got poor results, but says my parents. So what follows here should be the person who got poor results, but instead what has followed? My parents were really upset. It should have been getting poor results. I felt ashamed of myself. Or, for example, I really upset my parents. Okay, so be careful. Okay, so that when you're combining the two sentences, when you've been given an exercise where you're combining the two sentences, the two actions must refer to the same person to avoid what? The dangling participle phrase. Remember we said that the two actions must refer to the same person. Mary, the action in the main phrase, in the participle phrase, and the action in the main sentence must refer to the same person. All right? Now, here, the idea is that this action is not performed by my parents. That's why it looks like a dangling participle phrase. I'll give you more exercises to practice on it to avoid the idea of ambiguity and the idea of maybe having a participle phrase that looks like as if it is hanging. All right? Now, having said that, we can also add that the participle phrase now that we know that the participle phrase can be introduced by either a present participle or a past participle. We say that the example of a present participle is like leaving the baby on the bed. Juma went outside, and another one left on the bed. The baby began crying. So either case, they're just used to give us more information about the noun in the sentence. In either case, only that the other one is in the present and the next one is in the past. When you use the past one, it will be left. When you use the present one, again is the ing format. But the idea here is to know that the participle phrase is normally used to describe what? The noun in the main sentence. Now, one other use of the participle phrase. Okay. So I want to add one more example so that the meaning is more clear. I'm trying to emphasize the fact that, you can combine two sentences by making one a participle phrase, but now the two actions are not referring to the same person. So I'm going to give you another example that will show a dangling participle phrase or a participle phrase that is not clear on who is performing the action. Now we have coming round the bend, Mount Kenya appeared in all its glory. Coming round the bend, comma, Mount Kenya appeared in all its glory. You see, in the sentence that we have here, coming round the bend should be performed by whatever follows the participle phrase. So we should be very we should be very careful so that when beginning the sentence with a participle phrase, the meaning must be clear, such that in this sentence, when you say coming round the bend, Mount Kenya appeared in all its glory, it means that it is Mount Kenya that came round the bend, which is something that can rarely happen. There's no way that Mount Kenya has now legs that it has started coming round the bend. So it's very important that we should be able to combine the sentences by making one a participle phrase, yes, but now we should be careful with what? With the meaning that we're trying to pass across. All right, so that we avoid the idea of the dangling participle phrase. The two actions must refer to the same person, and the same person must be something, credible, not something that brings out the idea of maybe the sentence is not so clear or something like that. Now, having said that, we have finished on the idea of the past participle phrases and present participle phrases. Remember, we say that present participle phrases, they are used to emphasize that the action comes immediately after the action in the participle phrase. The action in the main sentence comes immediately after the action in the participle phrase. Now, in the past participle phrase, the action in the participle phrase happens before the action in the main phrase. Now, another difference between the two is that in the present participle phrase, the sentence begins with a present participle, and in the past participle phrase, the sentence begins with a past participle. Now, we've also said that we should be careful with dangling participle phrases, such that the two actions must refer to the same person, okay, and the meaning must be more clear. All right. And having said that, I would want to add something more before we finish. That we say that language is very important, okay? Such that when you're writing your compositions, you should be able to show that you have ability or maybe linguistic ability to express it in various forms. And one way that teachers of English ensure that know that a student is competent is by the use of a variety of sentences. And one thing that a participle phrase can help a student is when you're writing that composition, you're avoiding the idea of simplicity. You are showing creativity. So how do you show creativity? By having a variety of sentences. So the participle phrase can be one way of ensuring that you have a variety of what? Sentences in your composition. All right? Let me give you that note that I've just talked about, such that we are looking at the participle phrase in its entirety, having distinguished it in the sense that we have present and past. Now, how can it be useful to you as a student? Even as you're doing the exercises, before you do the exercises, you should also know that this one is also helping me in my spoken and also in my written. When I'm speaking, someone will know that I know English because I'm using a variety of sentences, or even when writing, I'm using a variety of sentences. So the participle phrase, therefore, you can write that. Therefore, the participle phrase is useful in sentence transformation where two sentences are combined by making one a participle phrase. For example, the food Maria washed the dishes. Okay. Let me just say, allow me to write this first sentence. Well, Maria finished the food, and then Maria washed the dishes. So we just have said that the participle phrase is useful in sentence transformation where two sentences are combined by making one a participle phrase. So we want to combine these two sentences by making one a participle phrase. The sentence reads, Maria finished the food, Maria washed the dishes. So when we combine the two, we'll say, having finished the food, Maria washed the dishes. So having finished the food, Maria washed the dishes. So that as you're writing, as you're speaking, you can always, create variety in the way you're speaking by using the what? The idea of a participle phrase. So having finished the food, Maria washed the dishes. So I want to give you a small assignment so that it can help you practice on the idea of the dangling participle phrase and the idea of the past and present participle phrase for exercise and maybe to master the skill well. All right. So let me give you one exercise here, two exercises. Okay, so improve the dangling expression to make them clear and sensible in the sentences below. Burdened under the weight of guilt, every day seemed like 1,000 years. Having finished, number 2, having finished the presentation, Cheptow's mind went blank. Then we have turning to page 4, my eye was struck by the use of contrast. Then number 4, being made of porcelain, Jane handled the vase carefully. If you look at those sentences, there is some sense of lack of clarity. So I want you to improve them, okay, with the skill that I've just shown you. Make sure that whatever the two actions must be performed by the person, and it should be clear, all right, so that it doesn't create ambiguity or maybe the idea of dangling expressions. I want to add you one more exercise before we come to the end of our lesson. Using the past participle as directed, form one sentence from the pair given. So question 1, the girls talked non-stop. They reminisced from dawn to dusk. This is R. They reminisced. They reminisced from dawn to dusk. Use a present participle now to combine the two sentences. The kite rose beyond the treetops. It seemed to dance in the wind. Use a present participle. So combine the two sentences by making one a participle phrase, but it should be a present participle phrase. He was stranded in the dark alley. Question 3. The little boy slept. Use a past participle. Question 4. The house help had washed her clothes. She hung them on the wash line. Use a past participle. Number 5. The salesgirl had wrapped the gift. She handed it to the customer. Use a past participle. So in all the sentences, you will follow the instructions given in the brackets, ensuring that you combine the two sentences by making one a participle phrase. Now it will either depend on what has been mentioned in the brackets. If it is present, combine it by making one a present participle phrase, and maybe if it is past, combine it by making one a participle phrase. Now we have come to the end of the lesson. Next time we're going to look at something else.